Welcome to Because Plot, where I point out all the things that happen in movies simply because the plot says so, regardless of whether they make any real sense or take any real natural occurrences in the film. My name is Bert Himes, and today I'm going to talk to you about Accepted. Accepted is a 2016 comedy starring Justin Long, Jonah Hill, Blake Lively, Louis Black, and many others who I don't have time to mention right now, filled with plenty of early 2000s laughs and a lot of because plot moments. How many? Well, let's get into it and find out, shall we? Alright. Our first because of plot moment is actually a because of plot character, our main character, Bartleby. Someone who is smart enough to pull off elaborate schemes like in the opening of the movie here where he is creating fake IDs for fellow classmates, or as I mentioned later on in the film, able to get a bully kicked out for harassment, able to convince teachers that he's studying in his sleep because he's nocturnal, but somehow he lacks the ability to be able to fake his way into any college. Like many protagonists of this era of filmmaking, he needs to be clever enough, like in that Zach Morris sense, to be able to make the plot happen, but not so smart that those skills would actually land him into a school. But if he was, then there wouldn't be a journey and the movie needs to happen. Next up, Bartleby obviously gets rejected from every single school that he's been to, while his friend Sherman Schrader gets accepted into Harmon University, the college that's within this town. And Sherman, who is the exact opposite of Bartleby, very cautious and very neurotic and nervous, his parents then decide to throw a party celebrating him getting into college. We run into our next because of plot character, that's two in a row, who is Rory, who was part of their friends group as Bartleby is hanging out with their other friend Hans, who couldn't get into school because he lost a scholarship because of an injury. Rory is freaking out because she only applied to Yale. She spent her entire life from childhood wanting to go to Yale. And I count her because it's hard for me to believe that someone, again, who's supposed to be this intelligent, would not have a backup school or wouldn't have been convinced to have a backup school by her parents or any guidance counselor. If she did, the movie doesn't make that clear. And because of that, she ends up on this list because I just don't believe that someone who's supposed to be that smart would do something so utterly dumb. Oh yes, and Rory was played by Maria Thayer, by the way, who I didn't mention earlier, but I'm mentioning her now because I enjoy the actress. She's been in other films, and I love her character in this, and plus I just think she's hot. I won't count Hans, played by Columbus Short, because even though his situation is manufactured for him to be involved in the story also, his situation is a bit more believable and more realistic than everyone else's, and also it's of no fault of his own that he's in the situation that he's in for not being able to go to college. Also, it's my list, so I can do whatever I want. So next, in an act of desperation, Bartleby decides to make a fake acceptance letter to South Harmon Institute of Technology. If you call it an acronym, then you're a smart person, to try to get his parents off his back. And for some reason, his parents buy this, again because this just needs to happen, even though I'm going to bet that these people have lived in this town their entire life, if not at least for the entire life of both of their children. And they literally have never heard of this college. The town isn't that big. They would have known that this school exists. But they, for some reason, buy Bartleby's story. And so, because of the success of this, Bartleby also has to give a fake letter to his friend Hans because his parents want to get him a bus route and he wants no part of that. They convince Sherman Schrader to make a website for it because obviously his dad's going to check. And his dad checks the website, and his dad, for some reason, continues to buy this. Now, I'll give his dad some credit. At least he did check the website, but I'm only going to give him partial credit and won't understand as we move on why, because it makes no sense why he should buy this, and also makes no sense that he just hands his son a $10,000 check for the tuition, just straight up hands him a $10,000 check. I've never been to college, fair enough. I'm not entirely sure if that's how it works, but I doubt that your parents would just give you a $10,000 check. If they would, let me know down in the comments if I'm wrong. But I seriously doubt it. So after giving him his $10,000 check, Bartleby's dad decides he's going to drop him off at college, to which Bartleby obviously panics, which rightfully he should, because this whole thing should have blown up in his face long before this point. So he gets together with his friends to try to figure out what location they can use for the school, because the school currently has no building. Which speaks to a very important point. Where was his dad going to drop him off to? He went to the website. Obviously, the website for the school would have the address for the school. They made the website before they had an address. So, what school would he have gone to? There was no address on the website. Did he skim over it for 5 seconds, read a mission statement, and move on? I'm guessing so, because I'm thinking there's something in this water that makes the people in this town selectively stupid. And you might think the same thing by the time I'm finished with this. But anyway, Rory has an idea about a place they can use, which is an abandoned insane asylum. And I'm assuming that they had to use all of their money, or next to all their money, between him, Hand, I always want to say Hans, but it's Hand, and Rory, who probably also by this point in time got a fake letter from them, who their parents, I'm guessing, gave them all $10,000 apiece, like just up front as a check, because it's hard to believe that a bunch of 18-year-olds with presumably no credit would be able to lease a place without having to put down a tremendous amount of money. But because the plot needs them to have a building, they get the building, because of course they do, and they spend all summer fixing this building up. And that's another because of plot moment in my opinion, because how are they able to fix up this entire building, which by the way is not even that geographically far from Harmon College, which is only like a few buildings away? How are they able to, arguably over the course of an entire summer, able to fix the whole place up without anyone noticing or asking any questions? Especially because, as we get later onto this list, there are reasons why someone would have probably noticed by now or paid close attention. But again, the people in this movie and in this town are selectively stupid because reasons. So obviously they montage up that building, get it fixed up just enough to pass off as a reasonable college to anyone who doesn't look too deeply into anything. They get some fake exchange students to come and act like they're actually students at this school. Which leads us to our next point, which is the Dean of Harmon College. Now, I want you to follow me on this. The Dean says that a school's exclusivity comes from the number of people that it's able to reject, to which he feels that Harmon College isn't able to reject enough people. And he's explaining all this to Hoyt. Who's Hoyt? I haven't mentioned Hoyt before this point because Hoyt really wasn't important before now, but Hoyt is the boyfriend of Monica. Monica, who was the neighbor of Bartleby, the girl that Bartleby is all horny for, because this is a 2006 movie, and that's just how it works. And Hoyt is a student at this school. Arguably, he must be at least a sophomore, maybe a junior. But he's a student, and he's in a frat. So I don't understand why the dean of the college, first and foremost, is divulging these plans to a student in the school, which is the kind of thing that happens a lot in these kind of movies. The dean of schools, for some reason, have some student working for them, even though the student isn't faculty or an employee of the school. In fact, he's paying to be there, but somehow you're going to employ him to handle things that you, as the dean, the adult, should probably be handling. But I digress. The dean's plan is to get rid of all the other buildings, to build an elaborate giant walkway like Harvard or Yale or other Ivy League schools, because it's a, as he put it, a buffer zone to keep knowledge in and keep ignorance out, even though students apply online or by mail, arguably. So how would a physical walkway be able to help you to further exclude students when they're applying through applications which you deny, which means they wouldn't show up in the first place? His plan makes no sense, but it literally only exists so that we can have some manufactured drama between Hoyt and Bartleby, because outside the fact that Hoyt is the guy that dates the girl that Bartleby wants, there's really no reason for these two to interact. And outside of this, they really wouldn't interact, but we need to create tension between these two, who also, throughout the course of this movie, barely interact anyway. And arguably, Hoyt, while he is a bit of an arrogant guy, up to a certain point isn't even really portrayed as a necessarily evil person by any means. He's just actually just kind of a bland, regular frat guy. But again, the movie needs this to happen because we need some sense of conflict that barely even plays throughout the rest of the movie, not until the very end. But I digress. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's move forward. So, obviously, Bartleby and his friends get away with their scheme because, of course, they do. And while they're just, dicking around at their made-up college, hanging out, having fun, playing video games, they get a knock at the door, to which they get introduced to all of the people who got accepted into their fake college because Sherman expertly made the website a little too well. And I'm not really going to count this as a because of plot moment, because even though it is very contrived, and the odds of these people actually being able to get into the school or find the website of a place that has really no search history is astronomical, the movie itself actually acknowledges this as a point of plot and a point of tension. And this happens because we need there to be more stakes to the movie. Otherwise, it would just be a film about 5 kids who hang out in an abandoned building for about 90 minutes until it just sort of ends. And we also need for it to, again, come off as a real college. So I'm not going to count it because the movie within its own plot acknowledges it. And I can't in good faith count that. So they find out that every student, literally every student for this school, has paid the tuition in full. They have bags of mail, and they have collected arguably $1 million or more for this school because, again, everyone paid in full. No loans, no partial payments, no anything. Everyone paid in full. In fact, there's a delivery guy who decides to join the school, and he pays 4 years in advance because everyone in this movie somehow has thousands of dollars. Granted, it's their parents' money for the most part, but still, I think you get my point. This whole scene exists so that we have a reason to explain how they're able to afford all the things they get in the school, and so that way, money is no longer an issue, and you can just chalk up any other extravagant purchase they make up to it coming from the budget, which at this point, they never clearly define how much it is past $1 million. So at that point, Bartleby decides that instead of rejecting all these students because he doesn't have the heart to do so, he allows them to stay at the school. So they build up the facility, get new stuff into the school, and after this point, his parents call him because his dad was reinvestigating the website and didn't like the mission statement, which obviously he didn't because obviously this is fake, which obviously he should have figured out a long time ago. And so while he's talking to Bartleby, asking what course he's taking, Bartleby is randomly looking around the school at different things happening, trying to describe the courses, and the most random thing happens. Literally, the most random thing happens, which is a skateboarder skateboards past Bartleby, literally says, "Thanks, dude," while grabbing Bartleby's phone to jump in the pool. That's what he does. He skateboards past, grabs the phone, jumps in the pool. Arguably for the only reason being that the conversation between Bartleby and his parents needed to end, and it needed to go on to another scene. Because why? Why? Why did this happen? No reason. Yeah, nah. So, our boy Hoyt is back into the movie again, and he comes to South Harmon to meet the leaseholder for the building because, again, they're trying to buy up all the buildings so they can build that giant walkway that's supposed to serve a purpose that it really doesn't serve, but we need this to happen. And he runs into Bartleby again, which he recognizes. Bartleby, again, has to antagonize him because he doesn't like this guy because, again, he's dating the girl that he wants to be with. And up to this point, that's primarily the only reason he dislikes Hoyt. But we also need this to happen so there's further, tension between these two, which is barely there and doesn't even play again for the rest of this movie until about the last 30 minutes. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. And so then, after this situation goes down, Hoyt goes back to his dorm during a party, well, his frat house during a party, to further investigate Harmon, to which another girl walks into his room who hasn't been in this movie up until this point, but she will be in this movie moving forward until the very end, which she just disappears because the movie doesn't need her anymore. And her whole purpose in this scene is so that Monica, who comes to the frat house, can catch Hoyt cheating on her with this girl. I mean, the girl's shirt is off. They're about to get it in. And up until this point, nothing about Hoyt has indicated that Hoyt was a cheater. Nothing. Was he kind of a dick? Sure. He was a bit arrogant? Alright. But nothing about him up until this point indicated that he was a cheater. This only happened so that Monica has a reason to walk out on him so that she can go and be with Bartleby because this movie was made in 2006. That's why. Because she needs to be with the main character by the time this movie is over because that's how this kind of movie works out. So while all this is going on and while the school is pretty much in full swing, or I should say the school is pretty much all in full swing, Rory comes to Bartleby and tells him they have an issue. And I'm going to point out how not an issue this is at all. Bartleby's little sister has found out that this school is fake, which she kind of figured out pretty early in the whole situation. And so she blackmails Bartleby to get her a fake ID so she can vote because she's 36 even though she's actually 10. And you're probably wondering, okay, so why is this in the movie? Why is it in the movie? I asked myself that very same question. Because this is another scene that if you had taken that whole interaction out of the movie, it would change nothing. Because this literally doesn't come back into play later on in the movie. You never see the girl actually go vote. You never see her try to blackmail him for more things because she might tell the parents. Literally nothing else happens in this movie because of this. It never comes back to it ever again. This scene just existed because that's why this scene exists. This scene exists because they wrote it in the script and they filmed it so it could happen. That's why. So after that, we come back to Monica, who goes to her dorm room because earlier in the movie, when Bartleby was trying to figure out the whole college thing, they had a conversation about how she wanted to take some photography classes, but she couldn't because she wasn't a certain kind of photography major. So Bartleby leaves in her dorm room a photography book and a very expensive camera, which seems like a sweet gesture until you think about how did Bartleby know where her dorm room was? Because up to this point, there's no indication that he's ever actually been to her dorm room, that they've only had a handful of interactions. And after a handful of interactions, he decides to leave her an expensive camera and a book in her dorm room where he's never been. Which now raises a lot more questions that I am not going to get into in this video because this video isn't about that, but we need this to happen so that she can feel feelings for Bartleby and come to his fake school and gush all over him, even though in the real world this will probably be seen as a little off-putting and creepy because how do you know where I live? So after all of this, Bartleby decides to throw a major party at his college because in these kind of movies, you have to throw a major party if you're running some kind of college scam. It's just a thing to do. And of course, your major party has to interfere with the other party on campus, which is usually the big party, except for this year because your school or your scheme exists, so your party needs to be bigger than theirs because of course it does. And it obviously is a much better party, to which Monica shows up to the party. Her and Bartleby make out. And after the party, Sherman gets beat up by the frat guys because they know that Sherman at this point is friends with Bartleby because the chick who Hoyt was cheating on Monica with saw him at that party and ratted him out, and they decide to beat him up to get information out of him. They steal his computer and then they manufacture a situation to somehow get all the parents to not only show up to South Harmon, but also they show up with the police, shut down the whole school. And when things seem at their worst, luckily, when Bartleby's going to the mail, he sees that they were put in for a court hearing to be accredited because Sherman did it. Because, to Sherman's credit, Sherman is the one who has a lot of setting up for them and their haphazard plans. Like, he's the one who starts them a bank account, started their website, and he's the one who sent in a letter to get them accredited, because he knew that they wouldn't do it because they're all a bunch of idiots, except for when the plot needs them to not be idiots. So they go to the board to get accredited. Bartleby, of course, gives an inspirational speech, because in this movie you need to give your big inspirational speech that gets everyone all fired up and motivated, because in reality they probably would just shut the whole thing down, shut you down, and send Bartleby to jail, or at the very least fine him for all the money that he has scammed out of these people and their families. But instead they decide to give him a 1-year probation to be accredited to continue his experimental school project, which I guess I'll give them a little bit of credit for that, because they didn't just say, hey, you're a school now forever. They put it on a year of probation to add some reality to the situation, and the movie's pretty much over after that. Oh yeah, there is an after credit scene where there was this weird kid earlier in the movie where everyone was being asked what it is they like to learn, and he literally said he wanted to learn how to blow shit up with his mind. And arguably, at the end of this movie, the dean from Harmon College is going out to his car blows up, and Bartleby and that kid are standing there, and the kid's like, I told you, and he actually learned how to blow up stuff with his mind. And yeah, that's how this movie ends. And despite me, making fun of this movie, I actually really enjoyed this movie when it came out. I watched it many times way back then. It probably up until this point been a good 15 years since I've seen this movie. And I really love it. I enjoy it. Are there some things in it that are stupid and contrived? Yes. But I think it's filled with a lot of really interesting characters and a lot of really fun stuff. It's very much a movie that's a product of its time, but that also adds to my love for it. And I very much recommend that you go check it out if you haven't seen it. Well, that was accepted. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hate this video, give it a thumbs down. Either way, that counts as interaction for me, and that keeps me up in the algorithm. So either way, it works out. And if you want to support this channel, go ahead and subscribe. And until next time, this is Because of Plot. Alright? Peace.